Well, good evening and welcome to Doc Talk with Dr. G. Thank you so much for joining us. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m., we have a topic relating to health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And tonight's topic is one that's somber, at the same time, one that can also be inspiring in terms of healing. And we're talking about grief tonight and the loss of someone precious in your life. And in this particular case tonight, we're going to talk about a very sudden and shocking loss that happened about 4.5 years ago. And so, without any further ado, we'll get started on our presentation here, which I've entitled Struck by Grief, the Healing Journey of Losing a Loved One. And back in August 17th of 2018, about 4.5 years ago, Tatiana Blackburn, at the age of 20, lost her life in a Wisconsin car crash. And we'll talk about the details with Matt, her fiance, who was actually the driver of the vehicle on that fateful day. She was only 20 years old, perfectly healthy on the way back from Wisconsin to Canada when she lost her life abruptly. Tatiana, or otherwise known as Tat, and she'll be referred to as Tat tonight as her nickname, the name that the people use, name of endearment. And she was born in December of 1997 and passed away August 17th of 2017. Tonight, we're going to be talking to her father, Scott Blackburn, live from Peru. He's a missionary in Peru, and Scott will be featured after we have a word about the details and some of the grieving that her fiance, Matt, underwent. Matthew Collins, who'll be speaking to us from Heritage Bible College today. And he was engaged to Tat at the time, full plans to be married and have a wonderful life together with his lover, his loved one that he admired and adored so much, and lost her on that fateful day. So I'm going to bring in our guests tonight. Well, welcome, Matt and Scott. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Matt, thank you so much for your time, and Scott as well. I really, really appreciate it. I can't even fathom what you've gone through for the last 4.5 years. We're going to start by talking to Matt about the details of that day. And so, Matt, sort of take us through that day on August 17th, 2017, what you were doing in Wisconsin, what your plans were traveling back to Canada, and the details of what happened that day on that highway.
Yeah, we were actually just in Wisconsin on our way through. We had driven down to Western Canada, so Alberta, Saskatchewan primarily, to visit friends and family of mine. I'm from out west, even though we met and lived in Ontario. So it was just more so a chance for her to meet my friends and family and see where I grew up, and for me to propose. We had the wedding all planned, and we were actually to be wed a month after. But I wanted to make the engagement more special and memorable, so we did it on my family's homestead. So that's also a big part of why we were down there. Yeah, so I mean, she didn't know all that. She knew the engagement was coming, but she didn't know exactly where. Yeah, so that's why we were there, and then we were driving back, and we were in a rush to get back because we were leading worship that Sunday. So we were driving through the night, and she was asleep. We stopped on the side of the road at a truck stop to use the bathroom and just to refresh and be like, okay, like, you know, for me to check myself and be like, am I okay? You know, am I well rested? And am I able to keep going? And I felt fine. It was raining, and that was the other reason that I didn't swap there, was that she had been sleeping, and so I didn't want to wake her up while it was still dark and be like, hey, let's swap, and you can drive in the rain. I want to push through and wait till the sun came up or the rain stopped, and then we could make the switch, and I could sleep while she drove. That's what we did on the way down. So that was just what we were doing on the way back up as well. And yeah, so we were driving through Wisconsin, and to my recollection, it was raining, and we were in the far left lane, and we were driving a Honda Civic, her Honda Civic, and I didn't want to push that too hard in the rain. It's not really built for that. So there was a car behind us that wanted to get going, and so I remember switching over into the next lane. And whether they bumped us or whether we hit something on the road or just the water, I to my recollection, we got slightly bumped, but regardless, we lost control and spun out and hit the median wall. So the highway's going like this, and we kind of landed like this. And we were under a bridge. And like I said, it was raining. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that all happened there.
So Matt, now you're literally parked sideways on a highway with fast traffic passing by you, and Tat, I understand, was facing traffic. So essentially, if there was going to be an impact, it would hit Tat's side. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of a scenario that I think people would find like horrifying. And I've often imagined that sometimes, even if you're like in the passing lane and it suddenly comes to an abrupt stop and the other two lanes are going by fast, you're always wondering, this is like a landmine, something catastrophic could happen. What was going through your mind at that time? Was that sort of a horrific type of a situation, feeling totally vulnerable?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm sure, as you've experienced or others have experienced, when cars buzz by you really fastly, the car kind of rattles. And because of where we were under the bridge. It was just early dawn, so it was the least visibility possible, and it was raining, so people were swerving out like at the very last second. And I do recall one or two cars bumping us from in the back in the trunk area. The rest of them swerving out of the way, at the last second. So it was very traumatizing, very scary. I remember everything, really. I remember looking over, and Tat was already on the phone with 911. They were advising us to stay in the car. I remember our seatbelts had popped off on the impact of the crash. I think the airbags went off. Our dog was okay. We had a little 6-month-old puppy in the back seat, and he was awake and fine. Scared, obviously, but he was okay. And so, like, what I wanted to do was get all of us and run out and get out. But they advised us not to. They said, the ambulance is going to be there in 5 minutes. And I think from the police report, it said somewhere around 4 minutes. And the crash must have happened around 3 minutes because it happened before they got there. So
at this point, Matt, Tat is fully conscious. She's on the phone. What sort of conversation are you having together during this sort of very vulnerable state?
Yeah, I'm freaking out, which wasn't my expectation. I thought that I'd handle it a lot better than I did. I'm a bit more, I'm not very emotional in the way that I process things, the way that I make decisions. But in that moment, I was, just very scared, not logical and calm. And she was very calm. She had a lot of faith in God. I think that helped her immensely in that moment. And so she was just like, I remember she said to me, like, just be calm. I need you to be calm and pray. And so that calmed me down a bit. I was praying and still freaking out, but praying and trying to calm down. And then I remember her saying something like, "Oh no," or something. And then us both looking out the window, and I couldn't see it. So she must have seen whatever was coming towards us.
Wow.
I believe it was a semi truck that hit us. But I remember looking out the window, but I don't remember seeing it.
So this is so the impact happened while you're waiting for the ambulance to arrive. They didn't quite make it in time. And do you remember anything after that crash? Like, you remember hearing the impact? You remember seeing the truck coming?
I don't
Or
remember seeing the truck or hearing the impact. I was told afterwards that I had been thrown into the back seat from the force of the impact. It threw me from the driver's seat all the way into the back. And then I was back there with my dog.
because I understand the impact dislodged the seatbelt. You actually had
Yeah, well, I think when we hit the median wall, it dislodged the
Okay.
seatbelt, and so when the we're sitting like this, and the semi hits, and so it rattles us, right? And so I from what I was told, I was thrown into the back, and then I don't remember, but I don't remember that. I think I remember waking up in the ambulance for like half a second type thing, or like that's where, because your brain is so rattled, it's hard to differentiate between what actually happened, or is your brain just trying to connect things that maybe aren't there. Yeah, I think I remember that though, and I do for sure remember waking up a couple times in the hospital. I remember them telling me that she's okay, which is what they do when they don't know, when they haven't assessed yet where you're at physically, whether you're in a critical state or not. Because if they were to tell you, she's passed, then if you
Yeah.
are in a critical state, your body will just give up. So,
Can you tell us when you were told that she passed? What your recollection of that is? Who told you, and what was the impact psychologically, emotionally, spiritually when you heard that she had passed?
I remember it being, just this room. I'm very, very severely concussed at this point. So in my mind, it's this dark lit room with a bright light on, and I can't remember who's talking to me. I wasn't looking at faces. I was just trying to keep my eyes open type thing. So whether it was a police or a doctor or whatever, someone told me that that she died, and I don't even remember the words that they used. I just remember, that was the reality, and I couldn't fully process it. It was so striking, so difficult that your body kind of, as a defense mechanism, removes itself. And so I just didn't even know what to do. I think I just stood there stunned, or laid there stunned, and just like, I don't even know if I said anything. I might have just nodded. I was just shocked, and so much shock. Yeah, I think I passed out again shortly after that. I think part of that was just like not wanting to be there in that moment. So
Now, it's obviously very difficult in a short period of time, Matt, to do full justice to the grief that you've gone through, the loss. But can you, as best you can, kind of describe the different emotions that you experienced over the last 4.5 years, the initial trauma, and how you started sort of coming to terms and dealing with trying to heal through this, if you can ever heal from this kind of trauma and loss?
yeah, that's a difficult question, because I don't know if you ever can fully heal. I think it's always going to be with you. Um, I think there's aspects that you can heal from, but you're never going to be the same person again, right? Like it's almost like when you grow up, and your frame of reference, your way of looking at the world, it's all changed, right? When you're a kid, you have all these big dreams. When you grow up, you kind of become more centered and more focused on what actually is reality. This is a bit like that, in the sense of like, my whole reality was taken from me, and so I don't view the future the same way, and I look at heaven in a different way than perhaps someone who hasn't lost someone. I look at God and his sovereignty in a different way. So there's lots that has changed from it.
Were you ever angry at God, Matt? Were you ever? Did you ever sort of get to a point where it's like, God, hi, I was basically doing everything fairly right, and we had this beautiful life ahead of us, and now she's gone. Can you talk about maybe some of the emotions directed toward God? Whether there was any sort of anger, and how you sort of process that?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Because initially I was asked that a lot in the first year, and in the first year, not so much. It wasn't actually immense anger; it was confusion and pain. I don't know if it's anger though, because I had to ground myself to the fact that He is good. If you lose that God is good, lost, right? Like, how do you navigate through that? But hold an equal strength that God's good, and then also hold an equal strength how horrendous this is. That's what becomes really difficult for your mind to rationalize and try to figure that out. Because you can't minimize either one. If you minimize how horrible this situation is, then you're not going to see it clearly, and you're not going to be able to fully process it. And if you minimize, that God is good, well, maybe He's not fully good or whatever, then you lose sight of God, right? So that was the difficult part. I think there was a brief period of time where I was trying to walk away from God and trying to just escape from it, just mentally, like, what if He doesn't exist? Because that's easier, right? If
Right.
I take God out of the equation, I don't have to ask why this happened. I don't have to ask how God's going to use it or use me or any of that. I can just be like, bad stroke of luck. It is what it is, and move on. But that I knew that wasn't true. There was so many little things about our relationship, about how we met, about how we matched together perfectly, and even about the crash that just like were not happenstance. It was clearly orchestrated. And I was like, okay, God, well, what the heck? Like, what is this for? And I don't know if I fully comprehended that. I think part of it is things like this where I can speak into other people's lives and be like, hey, whatever you're going through, that doesn't diminish God. Like, God, there is a God who knows what you're going through and cares for you and wants to be there for you. And yeah, He's all powerful, but there's things that He allows to happen that are beyond our understanding. But that doesn't mean that we stop asking the questions, right? Like, I think a lot of Christians are afraid to get into those difficult questions and those difficult ponderings. And then when they get face to face with it, that's when they lose their faith because they haven't had to think through that. I think God wants the opposite. God wants a relationship. And so, and in a relationship, that's what you would do. You would ask your loved one, hey, why did you do that? Why, and you can be upset with your loved one, and your loved one understands and is going to try and lovingly guide you and show you why. But sometimes, the answer, you're not ready for the answer, or the answer isn't what you want to hear, or whatever, right? And there's a process to that. And so, yeah, with my journey with God, that's been a lot of what it is, and allowing myself to ask those difficult questions and to ponder those things and to go into those difficult conversations.
Well, it's very well articulated, because I think, Matt, that's one of the stumbling blocks for many people to faith is pain, suffering, loss, things that happen like this with Tat that to some people seem just completely random, and they then go on to dismiss the presence of God, because they say, well, if there is a God, why would He take away my fiance whom I love so abruptly and so violently, if you will, like in a car crash?
Yeah.
Can you speak to people that maybe are listening to us today that say, there's too much pain and suffering. Look what you've gone through, Matt. There can't be a God. Can you speak? Because you seem to have preserved your faith through this very difficult journey. How did you do that? And how would you communicate the presence of God in the face of loss and suffering?
I don't think I did it. I think God has done it through me and just molded me. There's a lot of complex concepts to tackle there in such a simple question, and that's why it's difficult to answer for people, because everyone's situation is different. But first off, like the scripture says, like, no evil comes from God, right? So that is something we have to eliminate from our thoughts in order to see, okay, what is going on here? Why is there evil in the world? Because man fell away, right? You go back to Adam and Eve, and we live in a broken and fallen world. So then you ask the question, okay, well, what was God's original design? And then you start to see, like, oh, it was to live in harmony with him and with each other. There would be no death, there would be no murder, there would be, so a lot of these things that we're mad at God for, it's what we have brought into the world. Now, is God all powerful? Can he stop some of these things? Yes. But then to say that, you have to eliminate the freedom of choice. And so once again, there's so many complex things here. The necessity for choice is the necessity for love. We understand love to be contingent on choice. If I love someone, but I don't allow them to leave, no one would say that's love, that's abuse, right? It's control. So God has to allow us to have that choice of either choosing him or choosing the world, or, choosing to love others or choosing to kill others, or, these things have to exist. You can't have good without the presence of bad. You can't know what your favorite chocolate bar is if that's the only chocolate bar you've ever had. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
That's why there's like there's a lot of complex things in that, but that doesn't offer anyone comfort, right? But it's good to not lose sight of that in order to process those things, to be able to see clearly what is going on here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well put, Matt. Just I'm going to be asking Scott the same question here. Over the last 4.5 years, can you just point to things that people did beside you, family or friends, that were particularly helpful through the journey of grieving? And then conversely, maybe well-meaning things that people did that actually ended up hurting you. If you could briefly speak to that.
Yeah, I could speak a lot to that. I think the best thing that people did for me was listened, and just let me go through my process of venting and asking ridiculous questions and giving my mind that freedom to just process things. One of the first people I met with when I came back to visit Heritage, where I work now, and where me and Tap met, I met with David Barker, and I sat in his office, and he actually expressed his anger with God so that I didn't have to. I think that helped me a lot too, was he was like, God, this guy just lost his dad, and now a couple years later you take away his fiance. How dare you? He was very just upset and expressed that with me, and I was like, wow, thank you, because that kind of allowed me to not have to do that work.
Right.
So I was able to ask him difficult questions that I knew he wouldn't have the answer to, but things like, okay, can we still get married?
Yeah.
If I stay single, can we still get married someday? And just allowing me to think through those things and talk through those things, not shutting me down.
Right.
And so that was very beneficial.
So listening and affirming your emotions,
Yeah, and just being there, letting me process and thinking through those difficult things with me. I think the things that were detrimental, there's a lot, unfortunately, and just through counseling, I've been able to talk about those and realize that, those were in and of themselves trauma. Lots of times people think of the initial accident as trauma, but there's little micro traumas that happen afterwards that just prolong the healing process. So I remember people at the funeral, literally I'm burying my fiance, and they're like, I hope you find love again, or I know that you'll find love again, or you deserve love. You don't want to hear that.
Right.
In that moment. You're focused on the fact that you just lost your life. That was your life. That was your future. You don't want to hear that. And I know they meant well, but that was difficult. That was difficult to process. I lost friends. There was friends who couldn't handle being in my life because they couldn't see me without seeing Tat. And so being friends with me reminded them of Tat. And so I lost friends from that.
Wow. Wow.
That's traumatic. I was told that I couldn't speak as plainly and as openly and as honestly about My process of grief, whether that's through my art or whether that's even in conversations, I couldn't swear, I couldn't speak about the dark aspects of it. People didn't want to hear it, especially Christians. It was offensive, and it was like, that's what I needed, though. I needed to process that. So being told that that was wrong and that I should be ashamed of that, that also caused me to slow down my processing and slow down my ability to access those thoughts and to process that and heal from that. So that was also traumatic. Little things like that that held me back. And I probably didn't even fully realize it in the moment, because you're in survival mode, right? Like,
Right.
I have friends tell me like, oh, I just can't be your friend, or I can't be close to you anymore because of Tat. You just like, okay, like you've just lost everything. So like losing a friend is nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, fine. But like that's how I'm processing that. But internally I'm like, oh geez, like now I'm afraid of how this experience relates to all my relationships. And I'm not fully aware that that's happening, but subconsciously I'm afraid that I'm going to lose other people in my life because of
Right.
what happened. Whether that's future relationships, whether that's the Blackburns, whatever. It's such a seismic shift in my life that I'm afraid moving on from it, or that I'm afraid that living in it, or whatever path, you want to take, is going to result in other people leaving. And that, is obviously traumatic in and of itself. So there's been lots of things that were mishandled, but very little of it was done maliciously. It's just that people are uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. They don't know how to help. They perhaps have never experienced anything so horrible and so hard. And so they are viewing your actions or your thoughts or your words in light of their reality, and you're living two different realities, right? Like what you've gone through and what you've processed is completely different from them. And so when you speak so plainly and so harshly about what's happened, that's off-putting to them, and they can't process that. So yeah, there's lots of things, but I think the best thing that people did was just allow me to be me and allow me to process and allow me to heal, and recognize that I'm not going to be stuck in this total depraved, like broken state, that there's going to be a process of a journey of coming back and allowing me to go through that. The Blackburns were great for that. When I went out to Peru, they're my family, right? Like I call them mom and dad and my brothers and sisters, like that's family. And because they allowed me to just be me. If I needed to sleep in, I slept in. If I needed to talk about difficult things, they would talk about it with me. Just allowing me to process everything and be me, that was so monumental in my healing journey. I think if I were to have stayed in Canada, for those that don't know, I went back to Peru where they serve on the mission field and grieved with them. If I were to stay in Canada, surrounded by friends that, maybe knew her better than they knew me, or knew me better than they knew her, like they didn't know how to, that would have been difficult to communicate the
Right.
depths of everything.
And to this day, you've maintained a very deep bond with the Blackburns. You
Oh
essentially,
yeah.
as
Yeah.
you say, like family. So, so Matt, thank you very much. And just one last the question: when you look at memories of Tat through these pictures, like you say, like so many have pointed out, that you just made an incredible couple. Shared so much in your life with music and faith, and your personalities and temperaments were aligning. What's going through your mind now, 4.5 years later, when you look at these memories, Matt?
A lot goes through my mind. Just that it was such a perfect love that very few people get to experience, and for that I'm grateful. If I find love like that again, great. If not, at least I got it once, right? So it was a beautiful time, and she was a beautiful woman of God, and I love her deeply, and I always will. So that's part of what goes through my mind. And just there's aspects of of who I was back then that, you know, I also love and appreciate and miss. But there's aspects of who I am now that I wouldn't have been able to get to without going through that. So there's a lot that runs through my mind looking through that. But just the incredible journey that God has brought me and the Blackburns and everyone through, and what I've learned about him through it. And yeah, there's a lot.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been speaking to Matthew Collins, Tat's fiance, lost his precious, beloved Tat 4.5 years ago. Matt, thank you so much for articulating your thoughts and your emotions and your faith through this very difficult journey. Really, really appreciate your time. We're going to now move on to Scott. Thank you again, Matt. Really appreciate that. We're just going to focus on Scott now. And Scott, welcome.
Thanks.
So Scott, it's been 4.5 years now. I just want to ask you, like, going back to that day, August 17th, where you were at the time, logistically, where you were living, and how you found out about Tat's passing.
Yeah, we'd been in Peru for about 4 years at that point, and Tracy and I actually just finished a Spanish class, just wrapped up when Tracy got a message from Matthew's sister, who lives out west, that there'd been an accident, and that she had gave us a number that we had to call to talk to Matt. So I was like, okay, I'm the guy. We're gonna go make the call, you know. And Tracy was right away. She knew something was bad. Mother instinct, I guess, you know. So I made the call a couple times. I finally got through. It had been a while now because it was about noon, same time zone. So it was about noon. So the accident happened about 6 hours, 7 hours before. So there was already people from the embassy were trying to get a hold of us, and they couldn't find us and whatnot. So I called Matt. Finally, I think I got his nurse first, and then I got Matt. And you know, he wasn't all there. He was okay. He could understand them, but you know, you could tell that he was avoiding wanting to say that she was gone. So finally, I before I got to that, I kind of yelled at him a bit, and I go, "Where's Dad? Where's Dad?" And so that he finally told us, you know. And it's really not something that you want to hear from your son-in-law, you know, your future son-in-law. It's not something you want to go through. So yeah, it was just a time of complete shock. Tracy just collapsed on the floor, and I just went into fix-it mode. You know, how's Matt? What's he doing? How can we care for him? You know, his family's out in Alaska and Western Canada. He's in Wisconsin, knows nobody. We're in Peru. You know, Tat's gone. He's got nobody there. Fortunately, a friend of ours here, another missionary family here, had a pastor. She's from Wisconsin, actually, had a pastor, and he was able to get to the hospital and just care for Matt while his mom was traveling. His mom and sister and brother were traveling down, and I think they arrived really late that night. And that pastor just stayed with Matt the whole time, just to be able to care for him. So I kind of went into a fix-it mode. You know, of course, then there was all the calls from the coroner. Tat never went to the hospital. She was passed away at the scene, so they took her straight from the scene to the coroner's office, and so there was all the calls with. You know, dealing with coroner. What do we do with this? What do we do with this? And then they're in the U.S. and they're Canadian, so there's embassy stuff and what else? Oh, there was an opportunity to donate some tissue and whatnot. Because she passed away right away, we couldn't do any live organ donation, but we were able to donate some tissue and skin and different stuff, things like that. So we had to deal with all that, and then of course we had to go through who do we call, you know. So we had to start calling family and friends. Yeah, they were pretty difficult calls to make. Sorry.
No, it's understandable. Obviously, it can palpate the anguish and the pain that's still here to this day. I mean, I'm feeling it. Obviously, trying to relate to this as a father, but I can't fathom that day and then the days leading up to the funeral. Um, how did you manage? There's a lot of logistics now to go through as far as now organizing a funeral, the shock of the loss. Can you just sort of speak to how you navigated through that, and who were the most helpful people during those first few days that were walking the journey with you?
Yeah, we had just literally just started with a new missions organization, having left our first organization 4 months prior or through that transition, and you know, they were awesome. They stepped up. They I couldn't even find a flight out of our little jungle town here. Everything was booked up, and their travel agent found us flights back. You know, so we had to come from Peru. Matt had to come from Wisconsin with his family. Tat was still there. He had to come home without her being ready to leave. So we got home. Our home church, Emmanuel and Barry, just stepped up in so many ways. I mean, we were cared for. We didn't want anything. I mean, we were given cars and houses and food and just help wherever we needed it. There was no question on how something was going to get done. You know, getting back to Canada, and then the coroner was ready to release Tat's body, and our good friend Matt Drury took care of all those details. Matt and I flew back down to Wisconsin to get her, flew back home with her. Yeah, just sorry, I don't know why I'm so emotional.
Well,
I've done a few interviews now.
I
Today,
think,
maybe,
well,
maybe you'll let me go first.
I think what it is, Scott, is we're going to talk about Tat's place as well in a moment, but I want to just speak to uh, those first few days, weeks, months, and then now years, in terms of this grieving that you've gone through, and obviously still tremendous pain and anguish. You can palpate that in your emotion, in your voice, in your spirit, and it's perfectly understandable. And it speaks to the authenticity of this program, the fact that this is real. Grief is very real and is very painful, and it goes on and on and on. Can you just speak, Scott, to what people said to you that, or maybe didn't say, that were very helpful, but also things that people said? We talked about this with Matt as well, that actually, although well-meaning, turned out to be actually very hurtful or dismissive. Can you sort of go through
Yeah,
your own experience?
yeah, I think the best for me, you know, everybody grieves differently. You know, Tracy just wanted to crawl up in the ball. The boys, they were just in shock. Me, I had to be busy and I have to get things done. So I just went into just doing everything that needed to be done. You know, we obviously had to plan the funeral, and we just went from planning a wedding to a funeral. So we had great help with that. The people that were honestly the best were the people that said the least. Um, you know, they just gave you that silent presence. You know, they just showed up, didn't say anything, didn't just there, gave you a hug, opened a beer for you, you know, whatever made you feel better at the time. And the people that said the least were the easiest people to be around.
So
Um,
less is more, essentially, is what you're saying.
yeah, absolutely. Silent presence is the biggest thing that I've learned when you want to be with someone who has just suffered a great loss. You know, you can't fix them. You can't you can't say something, you know, and there's a lot of stupid things you can say too. And we talk about it in the book, you know, just about what not to say, you know, because and I get it. I get people don't understand. I never did funerals well. I don't like going to funerals. I'm uncomfortable. It's because I don't want to say the wrong thing. You know, you don't want to trigger that person. Oh, can I say her name? Can I talk about a favorite memory with her? Of course you can. That's what we want to hear. We want to keep her memory alive and whatnot. And but people in their love for you, they want to try and fix you. They want to try and give you that one word or that one sentence that's going to make you feel good. And so many times, you know, it just goes south so quick. You know, I had one person say, oh, I know how you feel. I just lost my dog, and
Wow.
that's great. I don't want to diminish their loss. Obviously their dog was very close to them, and they felt that was an equal type of grief or ground. And I'm not trying to grade it, but it's not something I wanted to hear. Comparing losses and whatnot. So things like that aren't helpful at all.
I believe.
Pastors
Sorry to interrupt. I believe you told me once that someone said to you, "At least you have other children."
Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah. And that was our second loss, because we lost our first baby too. That was our rainbow child. So
I didn't realize that.
We never got to see that first baby. So our great picture in heaven now is Tat's caring for her little brother or sister. So, but yeah, so yeah, it's just a process, and we were so well supported. I mean, a couple just gave us their house. They moved out of their house. They went up to their cottage and they just gave us their house.
Wow.
And we were able to just have that time, and people dropped off cars and just fully supported. It was mind blowing when you look back at it, and everything was paid for, and there was not all we had to do was focus on what we needed to do as a family to be able to say goodbye to Tat and care for Matt, and all the other stuff was just taken care of, which was a big, huge part of our time in Canada. After we obviously had to deal with all the, packing up their apartment and all those logistics before we returned to Peru, but we were in Canada for about 3 months total. So.
Wonderful. Now, so I think just to cap it up, so things that people did that were helpful, sincere, just condolence, quiet, open-ended support, people giving you their house, silence. You mentioned that it's very important. Less is more as far as words. And I want to ask you, like, if people shared with you what Tat meant to them, was that helpful or not particularly? As far as like if they say, oh, Tat meant this to me, or was that sometimes more difficult than helpful?
I've never been. My personality doesn't like compliments, and
right.
I don't know what it is. I don't like hearing a compliment. I don't react well, and so when people were saying all that, I mean, it was great, and we met so many people that Tat had an influence on. Lots of late night coffees with girls at work, and just her, helping them and caring for them and loving them and sharing the gospel with them, and we didn't even know it. These girls just started reaching out to us and sending messages, and there was hundreds of stories about that, and it was overwhelming at the time, and you really have to look back at it, and because when you're going through it that first year, those first few months, it's just so busy. Your mind just can't absorb everything that you're hearing and everything that's going on, and it was great that God had used Tat in such a powerful way to have such a strong influence in her circle, and it was great to know that she had that ability, and that she paid attention in the sermons and the youth groups, and learned and read her Bible and understood what God wanted her to do and his purpose for her life, and so it was good to hear, but I don't think I truly absorbed it all, just because of, you're just being bombarded, it's like being in a rainstorm, and it's 40-kilometer-hour winds, and you're trying to get your umbrella up or trying to get under cover, and you just can't. You can't take it all in.
So it's safe to say that a really minimalist approach is the best, like minimal talking, minimal sharing, just be there, be present, be quiet, offer support, and not much more than that. I was going to say,
parents you're just being hammered with everything that has to go on. You've got to deal with insurance companies, you've got to deal with funeral, you've got to deal with church, you've got to deal with family coming in. There's just like 1,000 different things logistically, and everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody wants to, but you just don't have enough of you to share it all, So, I know we had one girl, obviously overwhelming at the church, when 1,200 people show up to say their goodbyes. And one good friend of Tracy's, Jen Mountney, she took point, and she was like the bulldog, she just like insulated us from everybody and filtered who was going to be able to get to us, because there were so many people, and we wanted to see people. We did, but she knew that there was a goal here to be able to get through this day,
Right.
and so she was like this awesome filter,
like a gatekeeper protecting you from
absolutely. And everybody needs that. Everybody needs that. It's kind of like a famous person showing up, and their people protect them from everybody that wants to say hi or shake their hand, right? So
understand. So Scott, just again, the things not to say, and sort of what your comments, and also some of the research of those that have grieved and studied grieving is, would you agree with this? I think you've alluded to some of this when somebody says to you, "Oh, I know how you feel," or, it's God's will that Tat passed, must have been for the best, and they start sharing their own stories, especially during the acute phase. Or they start telling you, or you're going to go through these stages of grief. Would you agree that those aren't particularly helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, honestly, silence is the best for me. I can't speak for everybody. Everybody grieves differently, but definitely silence is the best for me. I'll figure it out eventually. I've always been the type of person that I don't really, and I don't mean to say this harshly, but I don't really care what anybody thinks of me. I've never had that type of worry or that preoccupation where I'm worried that that person doesn't like something I said, or how I did something, or how I worship, or how I pray, or how I whatever. I don't care. I mean, if you have an issue with me or a problem with me and you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. If you don't, then we don't. I've never had that worry. So for me, it was like the silent was the best, and to hear it, oh, it was God's will. Okay, but I'm in a place right now where I'm not understanding God's will. It's always great to, as a Christian, to want to know God's plan. When we wanted to come on the missions field, we wanted to seek God's will. We want to know His plan for our trip to Peru, and how is it going to work, and how it's going to look. And He revealed that to us in so many different ways. But when He took Tad home, I want to understand His plan, but I can't see it. It's all foggy. Because right now, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? She was, going to Bible college. She had a loving relationship with a solid Christian man. Everything we prayed for as parents, we got, right? We prayed for her a good walk with Christ. We prayed for her to, study at a good school. We prayed for her to have a godly man come into her life. So we got all our prayers answered. But I had also prayed, Lord, don't take any of my children before you take me. I had prayed that prayer many times. He didn't answer that one. So when you're trying to understand God's plan, when you're in this stage of grief, it's completely foggy. It doesn't make any sense. For me, it's like, why? The whole thing is why, right? My whole life is now going to be why. Why did this happen?
And when you find that it doesn't make sense, how do you process that, Scott? Because I know you're a very logical, cognitive person that tries to sort of reason through things. So when it doesn't make sense and it seems kind of random and even harsh, one would argue, how do you cope with that? How do you manage that emotionally, spiritually?
Yeah, that's a hard one for me, because I struggle with anger. I have my whole life, and it's something that God has whittled away with over the years, and got a little bit better, but it's still there. It's still a very strong part of who I am. And so initially I was super angry with God. I mean, man.
Did the anger happen right away in the first few days?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right away. It's like, you just don't understand what's going on. And Tat and Matt had just before the accident, Tat and Matt had told us that they were going to, come to Peru, and they were going to, when Tat had finished her schooling, her first BA, they were going to come to school. She was going to finish her master's online, working towards biblical counseling, and they were going to come here and take over the home for us, which was awesome. They were going to come, the directors. So we were riding this mountaintop, here they're coming to Peru to get married. I'm going to officiate the wedding. I'm going to walk her down the aisle and marry her. Everything. My grandkids are going to be where I am, right? We're not going to live this missionary life where our grandkids aren't close to us, So we were on this mountaintop, and then in a split second, we're in the depths of the valley, and
yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed how angry I was at God, and I don't know if I'm fully not angry with him today. We still
I
have
think I think
some.
I mean, Scott, I think anybody that has any level of compassion or understanding would totally understand being angry at such a abrupt, violent loss of your precious daughter. And here, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was famous for her 5 stages of grieving: denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance. So she's trying to sort of make sense of the natural flow of the grieving process, even put it on to a graph here of the different phases of denial: initially anger, depression, then you bargain with God, and then you finally accept it. Scott, do you think this is accurate, or this is just too academic and not practical, aligning with the real world?
Yeah, I think in a perfect world and in a perfect psychology situation where you want to have a plan, that's kind of what you want, but that's not it at all. No,
Is it
I
more?
don't.
Is it more like this?
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Because
exactly
apparently,
it. You
I mean,
just go all
people.
over the place. I mean, I was just in Canada and spoke a few times, and now I'm just an emotional basket case today trying to get through this interview. And yesterday I was fine. It's just that the messed up one is what grief is. You don't know from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, year to year what it's going to be like. I mean, for me, the worst part was the second year after the anniversary of Tat's accident. That second year was worse, way worse, because when you're going through the first year, when the accident happened that day, it happened that day. I didn't have any build up to it. I didn't anticipate it coming, but then all the triggers start, so that for me, that second year was the worst, especially the accident day building up to that. I didn't experience the build up to that day before. So you just experience grief in so many different ways, and you just don't know when it's going to hit you.
Like you say with that graph, it seems to be much more random than the organized Kubler-Ross academic explanation of how you're going to have all these phases. Scott, as we conclude, I'd like to talk about 2 things, please. One is the book. Your story of grieving Tat's loss was actually featured in a book. Can you please speak to us about that book and how our listeners can order that book that want to learn more about grieving?
Hey, yeah, I think, can you see it there? Yeah. So,
You bring it a little closer to the camera, Scott. You had a focus
yeah,
there. Okay.
focus.
It's a little out of focus. Come back a little bit, perhaps.
There,
There you go. Okay. Now it's in focus. Okay.
Yeah. It's called Until Then. Tracy and I really didn't do too much other than our own sort of personal, time together or like each other sort of dealing with our grief. And then about year 3, we were invited to be a part of a grieving parents group. My safest place is with other parents of child loss. That's my safe place now. That's where I feel the most comfortable. And I'm grateful for that because they get it, right? They understand it.
Yes.
I'm also grateful for people that don't get it, because it means that they haven't had to suffer the loss of a child. So
Right.
all that being said, the book came together through this group. We were given a chapter each, and we were able to just write our story. And it's a collection of stories from other parents that have grieved losses. A couple of us from Canada, Australia, and the United States are covered, and it's just been a great time. It's found on Amazon. There's a Kindle version, and it's on Amazon. Just search "Until Then: Stories of Loss."
Until then,
it'll
okay.
come up.
We
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
So Until Then on Amazon, and your story about Tat's loss is there. And Scott, as we conclude, can you please speak to us about Tat's Place?
Oh, I lost you.
Sorry, can you hear me there?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. So just take us through this project that you have, Tat's Place.
Oh yeah. So we've always been in childcare in Peru. The first 4 years with a different organization, and then in 2018 we changed organizations, and we came back to Peru, opened our own association called the Alegre Sonido de Dios, which is Joyful Sounds of God, and that was the home that we had just opened prior to the accident. So Tat's Place came about. Immediately, our organization in Canada started two funds when Tat died. One's called Tat's Kids Peru, and the other one's called Tat's Place. And Tat's Place was for the construction, the purchase of property and construction. And we were really pushed by some great friends in Texas to buy property. So we did. We bought 12 and a half acres, about 25 kilometers from the largest city in the southern Amazon jungle in Peru. It was just bare property. Got a river in the back. Cleared a bunch of land, and we built a 7,000 square foot facility. It's a children's care home, so orphanage. Not all our kids are true orphans. Most are virtual orphans, where they've been either abandoned or some sort of trauma or abuse from sexual abuse or violent abuse. We've cared for 72 children total in the time we've been here, and we currently have 17 children living with in the home full time. We range all age groups, from babies, newborns. Our youngest is 12 hours old, and right up to 18, young adult. We're not an age out home, so even though you're out of the system, we're not an age out home. You could continue to stay and live with us. We'll help you with either post-secondary education or some sort of technical training or work related. We've had graduates that have graduated the home that actually work at the home. So it's just a place where children are loved and cared for. They come from some just incredibly dark pasts, and it's part of our healing process too, to be able to just love these kids and care for them, and just see the joy in their faces. They just have a normal childhood. So yeah, Tat's Place.
That's wonderful. How has that, Scott, helped you as far as the healing process? Has that been part of the healing journey, is to do something like practical in honor of Tat?
Yeah, you drive in the gate every day and you see Tat's name on the sign. It's a constant reminder of just who she was and how well she loved, and that's what we do. We want to love as well as she loved, and so these children come to us from just, it's another level of trauma for me. Just reading some of these backgrounds and some of these abuses is just unbelievably difficult to deal with. But we don't really focus on the past. We focus on their future and what it means to be able to just be a child and be free of that abuse and not have to suffer anymore, and just have toys and dolls and go to school and play and do chores and just be part of a somewhat functional, normal family situation where they can just be who they need to be.
It sounds wonderful. Obviously, it's been hugely helpful for orphans and that community. Matt, I'm going to bring you back in as we conclude, if I can. And again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. I just want to put up another picture here of Tat, and as we conclude. Perhaps, and this is very difficult, but just some concluding thoughts to speak to two groups of people. One, those that have had a sudden loss and maybe just can't make sense of it. It's just been so traumatic. And then those that are looking to help those that have had a loss that are close to them. I know it's hard to kind of encapsulate it in a few words, but maybe I can start with you, Matt, as far as speaking to those that have experienced loss and are having real difficulty handling it.
Yeah, I guess like the most honest thing I can say is that there's nothing that I can say that's going to really fix things or help things. There are things I can tell you that will give you grounding and kind of throw you a rope to help you get back to a stable place. And that's just, don't lose sight of God in the midst of all of this. Ask those difficult questions and process those things. Do it with wise counsel, with people that you trust, that you can you can be real with, find outlets, people that you can talk to and be real with. But don't lose sight of who God is. Don't lose sight of that love that he has for you. And also recognize that in a loving relationship, you're allowed to be upset with him, and you're allowed to, as Scott said, be angry with him and yell at him. And he can take it. There's a lot he's been through himself. Also the loss of a son. So, I think that's the God that we serve. We serve a God who has experienced the total depths of being a human, the total loss, and pain, and understands that and can relate to us in that way that others don't have with the gods that they pray to. So, don't lose sight of who God is. Don't lose sight of that love, and just hold fast to the people around you that allow you to be who you are and allow you to process that and heal in that journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, Matt, thank you so much for your time. I know you've been very gracious with your time. You're at Heritage, you work, you teach, and you've carved out time for this interview. And I really, really appreciate that. And then Scott, in conclusion, few words to those that may be going through a difficult loss right now, having difficulty sort of processing all the emotions, as you say, kind of bombarded with these traumatic emotions that have hit them unexpectedly.
Yeah, just find your place. It's your grief. It's your loss. You're allowed to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. Find your safe place. Find what you need, as long as it's not destructive. I wouldn't want you to get into alcohol or drugs or anything to make yourself feel better. But if you're in a deep place of depression, or you're struggling with something like that, then I would encourage you to seek help. But if you're just being who you want to be, that's okay. Surround yourself with the people. Your circle's going to change. Those people that you thought were going to be there for you probably won't be, because they can't handle your grief, and that's okay. But you need to find that smaller inner circle that's going to be. We have a definitely defined smaller inner circle now. Lots of our friends just don't talk to us anymore, which is fine. It's not a loss. It's just they're coping with our grief, our loss, Tat's loss in their way too. So when grief is so individual, you just need to be who you want to be and find what you need to do to get through those days. I can share with you that the sting, the real hard, painful stings of the early first year trigger days, second year trigger days, the sting does soften. The trigger days will always be there, but the sting does soften. You're not crying every day. You might cry every week, so it does get a little bit easier. I don't know if time heals all wounds is actually a good analogy, but definitely through our journey, I have an easier time now than I did in the earlier days, for sure. But it's just individual. If you're married, make sure you give your spouse time to grieve. Make sure you give her the space she needs to grieve in the way that she needs to grieve, right? Guys, we always want to fix, right? That's our male makeup. We want to fix it. We can't fix it. I can't fix anything. I can't fix the things that you went through in your life that challenged you and caused you grief and pain. And I can't fix that, but I can be there and be your friend and buy you lunch or something or to be a listening ear, right? So just don't try and fix it, because when you try to fix it, that's when things go south.
Yeah. These are the wise words from someone who's walked the difficult journey of grief and traumatic loss. Gentlemen, Matt and Scott, I can't express in words how much I'm grateful for your time and your authenticity. You're very transparent. You're very honest. There isn't any quick fix in this, as you say, Scott. It's not something we can fix easily. But thank you for sharing your healing journey that obviously is still ongoing. I don't know if it's ever complete. And may you be blessed. And again, thank you so much for your time. I'll just have a few more concluding words. And again, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You take care.
Thank you.
So we've been speaking to Scott Blackburn and Matt Collins, talking about grief, struck by grief, and processing grief, and perhaps you've experienced a traumatic loss. Perhaps it was a terminal illness of someone that you love. Perhaps it was a sudden loss, like with Tat, a sudden car crash, completely unexpected, completely unplanned, and completely shocking and devastating. We've spoken, the gentlemen are very real, very authentic, and obviously are still processing all the different emotions and all the different factors involved in grieving a sudden, unexpected loss. So we hope if you found this program helpful. If you would like to contact me with any suggestions for topics or any one-on-one coaching, please feel free to contact me at doctalkwithdrg@gmail.com. It's completely listener supported. So if you enjoyed this program and you've been enjoying Doc Talk with Dr. G, please consider donating, and any donation over $60, and we will send you the 2 books. Have a wonderful evening. And it's been Dr. G reporting and interviewing 2 gentlemen who've gone through a very difficult loss. And may you be blessed, and we'll see you next Thursday at 7:30 p.m.